May 4th, 1943, the North Atlantic, 240 miles west of the Outer Hebrides. Kapitän Leutnant Werner Hartmann stood in the conning tower of U-531 as his lookout swept the gray horizon with binoculars, watching for Allied aircraft that had become the Wolfpack's greatest nightmare. The sea was calm, too calm. Then the explosion tore through the water, 50 meters off the starboard beam. Hartmann's body slammed against the tower railing as a column of white water erupted skyward. Before he could shout the order to dive, a second detonation shook the boat, this time directly beneath the keel. The U-boat lurched violently to port. Metal shrieked. Men screamed below. "Aircraft!" the forward lookout finally yelled, pointing at empty sky. But there was no aircraft, no destroyer, no corvette slicing through the waves with depth charges ready. Hartmann spun in every direction, searching for the attacker that had just crippled his boat. The ocean remained empty, silent. Then his blood ran cold as a third explosion erupted 30 meters to port, exactly where he would have maneuvered to escape the first two. All ahead full, emergency dive. As U-531 struggled to submerge with hydraulics failing and seawater pouring through cracked seals, Hartmann realized what every U-boat commander had begun to whisper about in the officers' clubs from Lorient to Bergen. The Allies had deployed something new. Something the Kriegsmarine called Geisterminen, ghost mines. Weapons that appeared from nowhere. Weapons that hunted. What Allied scientists had developed in secret laboratories would prove more devastating to Hitler's U-boat fleet than any destroyer, any convoy escort, any tactical doctrine the Royal Navy had employed in 4 years of brutal Atlantic warfare. By the spring of 1943, the Battle of the Atlantic had reached its most critical phase. German U-boats were sinking Allied merchant vessels faster than American and British shipyards could replace them. In March alone, the Wolfpacks had sent 108 ships, 377 tons of desperately needed supplies, to the bottom of the Atlantic. The statistics were unsustainable. At this rate, Britain would be starved into surrender within months, and the planned invasion of Europe would become impossible. Admiral Karl Dunitz's tactics had evolved into a brutally efficient system. U-boats operated in coordinated groups, attacking convoys at night on the surface where their low profile and diesel speed gave them every advantage over lumbering merchant ships. When threatened by escorts or aircraft, they simply dove. The Type 7 U-boat could crash dive in 30 seconds and operate safely at depths exceeding 200 meters, far deeper than standard British depth charges could reach with any accuracy. The Allied response had grown increasingly desperate. Destroyers and corvettes carried depth charges by the dozens, rolling them off stern racks and firing them from side-mounted throwers in patterns, designed to bracket a submerged U-boat. But the weapons were crude. Each Mark 7 depth charge weighed 420 pounds and relied on a hydrostatic pistol, a pressure-triggered fuse that detonated at preset depths of 50, 100, 150, or 250 feet. To kill a U-boat, the explosion had to occur within 20 feet of the hull. Any farther, and the target would escape with nothing worse than rattled nerves and flickering lights. The mathematics were damning. A surfaced U-boat could be spotted from 10 miles away in daylight. By the time a destroyer closed to depth charge range, the submarine had vanished beneath the waves. Sonar, or ASDIC, as the British called it, could track a submerged contact, but only with frustrating imprecision. Water temperature layers bent sound waves. Wrecks created false echoes. Schools of fish mimicked submarine signatures, and a skilled commander could exploit these acoustic shadows, slipping away while escorts wasted precious depth charges on phantom targets. Commander Peter Gretton, who led the escort group defending convoy ONS-5 in late April 1943, described the frustration in his after-action report. "We could hear them down there. moving beneath us like wolves beneath a frozen lake. But our weapons were hammers trying to hit needles in the dark. For every U-boat we destroyed, we expended hundreds of depth charges against empty water. The Germans knew our limitations better than we did. The numbers confirmed his assessment. In 1942, it took an average of 250 depth charges to destroy a single U-boat. Escort vessels simply couldn't carry enough ordnance to saturate the vast volumes of ocean where submarines lurked. And even when patterns were perfectly placed, U-boats survived. The pressure hull of a Type 70C could withstand depth charge explosions at 30 feet distance. The kill radius was smaller than a tennis court, dropped blindly into three-dimensional space the size of a cathedral. What made the situation particularly devastating was time. A U-boat that escaped the initial attack pattern could slip away during the 45 seconds it took a destroyer to reload and position for another run. Or it could go deep, below 150 meters, and wait. British escorts had to remain with the convoy. They couldn't afford to hunt one submarine for hours while 6 others maneuvered into attack positions on the undefended merchant ships. Admiral Sir Max Horton, Commander-in-Chief of Western Approaches, put it bluntly in a February 1943 memo to the Admiralty. "We are losing this battle. Our weapons arrive too late and strike too weakly. Unless we develop a means to kill U-boats quickly and reliably at the moment of contact, the Atlantic will become a German lake. We need a weapon that doesn't require perfect aim, perfect timing, or perfect luck. We need something that hunts the hunter." What neither the Royal Navy nor the Kriegsmarine realized was that such a weapon already existed in a research laboratory in Hertfordshire, waiting for its moment to change naval warfare forever. German naval intelligence had monitored Allied anti-submarine developments with clinical precision since 1939. They knew about improved sonar systems. They knew about airborne radar that could detect surfaced U-boats at night. They knew about HFDF radio direction finders that triangulated submarine transmissions. Dunitz's staff adapted tactics accordingly, diving earlier, transmitting less, operating more aggressively in the air gap, where Allied aircraft couldn't reach. But the Kriegsmarine's Technical Assessment Division remained supremely confident about one fundamental limitation. Depth charges would always be dumb weapons. They fell through water at predictable speeds. They detonated at fixed depths. They were large, expensive, and limited by the payload capacity of surface ships. Most critically, they couldn't change course once released. A U-boat commander who saw the telltale splash of depth charges hitting the water had 3 or 4 seconds to execute evasive maneuvers, hard rudder, blow ballast tanks, reverse screws, before the explosions began. Let the British waste their resources on improved fuses and larger warheads. A June 1942 Kriegsmarine Technical Bulletin confidently stated, "The fundamental physics cannot be overcome. An unpowered weapon dropped into the sea is at the mercy of currents, inertia, and the three-dimensional freedom of maneuver our boats possess. No explosive charge dropped blindly from above will ever match the tactical flexibility of a pressurized submarine operated by skilled personnel." They were wrong. What German intelligence analysts failed to detect was the fundamental breakthrough in weapons guidance that British scientists had achieved by late 1942. While Kriegsmarine engineers focused on hardening U-boat pressure hulls and improving dive times, researchers at the Admiralty Research Laboratory in Teddington had solved a problem that had plagued naval warfare since the first submarine slipped beneath the waves. How do you make an explosive chase its target? Meanwhile, Allied losses continued to mount. In the first 20 days of March 1943, U-boats sank 97 ships, nearly 600,000 tons. Convoy SC-122 and HX-229 fought running battles across 1,000 miles of ocean, losing 21 merchant ships to Wolfpack attacks while managing to sink only one U-boat in return. The exchange rate was catastrophic. British destroyer captains grew increasingly frustrated. Commander Donald McIntyre, who had pioneered convoy escort tactics and personally sank 5 U-boats, wrote in his memoir, "We could find them, we could track them, but we couldn't kill them reliably." A U-boat that survived the first depth charge attack became exponentially harder to destroy. They would go deep, go quiet, and slip away while we wasted ordnance on seawater. We needed something that didn't give them that second chance. Then came March 1943, and the weapon that would give U-boat commanders nightmares. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that factories in England and America were already mass-producing a device that violated every assumption the Kriegsmarine had made about Allied anti-submarine warfare. A weapon that didn't fall dumbly through the water. A weapon that listened. A weapon that hunted. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what you know about acoustic homing torpedoes in World War II. Drop a comment below and let me know if you'd heard about the Mark 24 mine before and whether you knew it wasn't actually a mine at all. If you're enjoying these deep dives into World War II naval technology that changed the course of the war, hit that subscribe button. These stories take serious research to get the technical details right, and knowing you're out there makes it all worthwhile. The weapon had a deliberately misleading name, the Mark 24 mine. It was called Fido by the American crews who deployed it, and Wandering Annie by British airmen. But it wasn't a mine at all. It was the world's first acoustic homing torpedo, a weapon that could hear a submarine's propellers from a 500 yards away and chase the sound until impact. Development had begun in June 1941 at Harvard University's Underwater Sound Laboratory, where physicists worked on a problem that seemed impossible. How do you build a device that can distinguish submarine propeller noise from the random acoustics of the ocean, track that sound through three-dimensional space, and steer itself toward the source while traveling at 12 knots through water that absorbed and distorted every audio signal? The solution was elegant. 4 hydrophones mounted in the torpedo's nose listened continuously to sounds in the 500–1000 Hz frequency range, the exact acoustic signature of German submarine propellers and electric motors. When sound intensity increased from the left hydrophone, the guidance system adjusted the rudder to turn left. When the right hydrophone detected stronger signals, the torpedo turned right. The system self-corrected 20 times per second, creating a serpentine path that homed relentlessly toward the loudest sound source in the water. By March 1943, production models were rolling out of Western Electric's manufacturing facility in New Jersey at a rate of 100 per month. Each Mark 24 measured 7 feet 6 inches long, weighed 680 pounds, and carried a 92-pound Torpex warhead, powerful enough to crack a U-boat's pressure hull with a direct hit. The weapon traveled at 12 knots and could run for 15 minutes, covering 4,000 yards before its batteries expired. The first operational deployment came on May 14, 1943. Lieutenant William Dempster piloted a U.S. Navy PBY Catalina flying boat on anti-submarine patrol 500 miles southwest of Iceland when his radar operator detected a surface contact. Dempster descended to 2,000 feet and identified U-640 running on the Suau surface, charging batteries in the pre-dawn darkness. The U-boat crash dived immediately. Dempster's crew watched the telltale swirl of the diving wake dissipate, marking the submarine's last known position. In previous engagements, this is where the submarine would escape. ASDIC couldn't track from aircraft. Depth charges required surface ships. The U-boat would slip away into the black water and resurface 20 miles away. But Dempster's bomb bay carried 2 Mark 24s. He circled to the dive point and positioned his aircraft for the attack run. At 200 feet altitude and 120 knots airspeed, Dempster released the first torpedo. The Mark 24 hit the water with a sharp splash, its parachute falling away as the weapon sank to its preset depth of 50 feet. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the acoustic seeker head activated. U-640 was 400 yards away, descending through 180 feet and still running both electric motors at high speed to clear the area. The propellers created a distinctive acoustic bloom, a rhythmic cavitation signature that propagated through the water like a beacon. The Mark 24's hydrophones locked onto the sound immediately. The guidance fins adjusted. The torpedo began its chase. Aboard U-640, Kapitänleutnant Karl-Heinz Bitter ordered silent running, shut down all non-essential systems, reduce motor speed to dead slow, wait for the aircraft to leave. Standard procedure. It had saved his boat 3 times before. But this time, something followed him into the deep. The Mark 24 closed the distance at 12 knots while U-640 crept away at 4 knots. The torpedo seeker head tracked the subtle frequency shift as the submarine turned to starboard, adjusting course automatically. No human operator guided it. No radio signal controlled it. The weapon was autonomous, a mechanical predator following thermal signatures and propeller harmonics through the black water. At Dofor 14 hours, the Mark 24's magnetic influence fuse detected U-640's steel hull passing 8 feet overhead. The Torpex warhead detonated directly beneath the control room. The explosion was catastrophic. 92 pounds of Torpex, 1.6 times more powerful than TNT, generated a shockwave that crushed the pressure hull like tinfoil. Seawater flooded every compartment simultaneously. The stern section separated completely, sinking separately from the bow. U-640 imploded at 220 feet depth, killing all 48 crew members instantly. Dempster's radio operator heard the underwater explosion through his sonobuoys, a dull, prolonged rumble that lasted 4 seconds. Then, an oil slick boiled to the surface, spreading across 200 yards of ocean in the gray dawn light. Debris followed. Wooden planks, life jackets, personal effects, and the unmistakable diesel rainbow that marked a U-boat's grave. Dempster circled twice to confirm the kill, then transmitted the coded message that would change anti-submarine warfare forever. Scratch 1 pig boat, Fido performed, as advertised. It was the first confirmed kill by an acoustic homing torpedo in naval history. U-640's crew never knew what hit them. They had executed perfect evasion tactics against a conventional attack, and died anyway, because the rules of submarine warfare had just been rewritten without their knowledge. Within 24 hours, every Allied anti-submarine aircraft in the Atlantic theater received encrypted orders. Prioritize Mark 24 deployment against all U-boat contacts. The weapon was classified top secret, special intelligence. Air crews were forbidden from discussing it on open radio channels. If asked by surface ships what weapon they had used, they were instructed to report used mine, maintaining the fiction that these were defensive weapons dropped in U-boat transit areas, not active hunters. The Germans called them Geisterminen because submarines simply vanished after aircraft contact. No depth charge splashes, no obvious attack pattern, just sudden silence from U-boats that had been transmitting position reports minutes before. They couldn't stop what they couldn't understand. And by the time German naval intelligence figured out what the Mark 24 actually was, it was far, far too late. The Kriegsmarine's first clue came on May 22, 1943, when U-467 transmitted a frantic damage report, attacked by aircraft, evaded depth charges, then struck by underwater explosion 90 seconds after diving. The boat survived with a cracked hull and flooded aft torpedo room, limping back to Brest with 14 wounded crew members. The commander's report described something impossible: a delayed explosion that occurred well after the aircraft had departed at a depth of 160 feet, far below where any depth charge could have been preset to detonate. Technical analysts dismissed it as a lucky hit from a conventional weapon. Then 3 more U-boats reported similar attacks. Then 6 boats failed to return from patrol zones where Allied aircraft had made brief contact. By August 1943, German intelligence had collected enough evidence to confirm their nightmare. The Allies had deployed an acoustic homing torpedo. Interrogation of captured Allied aircrews produced only the cover story. We dropped mines. But the physical evidence couldn't be denied. U-boats were dying in deep water, minutes after evading surface attacks, with no Allied vessels nearby. What engineers discovered through painful analysis was just how sophisticated the Mark 24 actually was. Its acoustic frequency range precisely matched U-boat propeller signatures while ignoring wave noise, biologics, and the higher frequency sounds of surface ships. The weapon didn't chase the loudest sound. It chased the specific harmonic pattern of a submarine's electric motors and diesel engines. Testing revealed the Mark 24's guidance system could track a submarine through a 90-degree turn, compensating for target maneuvers with continuous rudder corrections. The weapon didn't need to hit the U-boat directly. Its magnetic influence fuse-detonated when passing within 20 feet of a steel hull, creating a shockwave that no submarine could withstand at depth. Most critically, intelligence officers realized the weapon eliminated the U-boat's greatest tactical advantage: the ability to escape by diving. Every conventional anti-submarine weapon gave submarines time to react. Depth charges took seconds to sink. Surface ships needed minutes to close range. The Mark 24 turned the ocean itself into a trap. Diving away from an aircraft no longer meant safety. It meant swimming into an ambush. Commander Werner Henke, one of Germany's top U-boat aces, wrote in his patrol log after surviving a Mark 24 attack in July 1943. "This changes everything. The moment we dive to evade aircraft, we become hunted instead of hunters. Our motors, the very systems that give us mobility and life, become homing beacons for weapons we cannot hear approaching until they detonate beneath our keel. There is no counter-tactic. We can only surface and fight the aircraft, or dive and hope the torpedo misses. Both options lead to death." Dönitz ordered immediate countermeasures. U-boats began using Pillenwerfer, chemical canisters that created bubble screens to confuse acoustic seekers. They experimented with sprint and drift tactics, brief bursts of speed followed by complete motor shutdown. Some commanders tried towing noisemakers behind their boats to decoy torpedoes away from the pressure hull. Nothing worked consistently. The Mark 24 was too sophisticated, its seeker head too selective. Pillenwerfer created temporary acoustic clouds, but submarines couldn't remain motionless indefinitely. They had to maneuver eventually, and the moment motors restarted, the torpedo reacquired the target. Decoys worked occasionally, but only if deployed before the weapon entered terminal homing range. Most U-boat commanders didn't even know they were under attack until the warhead exploded. By December 1943, Allied aircraft equipped with Mark 24s had sunk 37 confirmed U-boats with an 86% hit rate, unheard of lethality in anti-submarine warfare. The weapon that German intelligence had believed impossible had become the single most effective U-boat killer in the Allied arsenal. The ghost mines were real, and they were everywhere. Between May 1943 and the end of the war, Mark 24 acoustic torpedoes sank 68 German and 15 Japanese submarines, 83 confirmed kills from 340 launches. The 24% success rate doesn't capture the weapon's true impact. Every U-boat that dove to escape an aircraft faced the psychological terror of not knowing whether an invisible predator was hunting them through the dark water. Patrol reports from late 1943 onward describe commanders who refused to dive even under direct air attack, choosing to fight it out on the surface with anti-aircraft guns rather than risk the silent death below. The statistical impact was devastating. In March 1943, before Mark 24 deployment, U-boats sank 108 Allied merchant ships while losing 15 submarines, a 7.1 exchange rate in Germany's favor. By November 1943, that ratio had reversed. 51 merchant ships sunk, 29 U-boats destroyed, nearly 1.1. The Battle of the Atlantic turned decisively in favor of the Allies, and the acoustic homing torpedo played an outsized role. Lieutenant William Dempster, who achieved the first Mark 24 kill, survived the war and retired from the Navy as a commander in 1960. He never publicly discussed the weapon until 1973, when the Mark 24's classification was finally downgraded. In an interview with Naval Aviation News, he reflected, "We knew we had something special, but we didn't know it would break their will like it did. A U-boat crew could survive depth charge attacks, aircraft rockets, even convoy escorts, but they couldn't fight something they couldn't see, couldn't hear, couldn't escape. It wasn't just that we were killing their boats. We were destroying their confidence." The technology pioneered by the Mark 24 became the foundation for every acoustic homing torpedo developed since. Modern submarine-launched weapons like the Mark 48 AD-cap trace their lineage directly to the 4-hydrophone seeker head designed in Harvard's laboratory in 1941. The principle remains identical. Listen for the target's acoustic signature, steer toward the sound, adjust continuously until impact. The Germans never developed an effective countermeasure. By 1944, Dönitz had withdrawn U-boats from the North Atlantic almost entirely, redeploying them to Norwegian coastal waters and the Mediterranean, where Allied air coverage was less comprehensive. The Wolfpack tactics that had nearly severed Britain's Atlantic lifeline were abandoned. Germany's submarine force, which had come within weeks of winning the Battle of the Atlantic in early 1943, spent the final year of the war hunted and ineffective. Post-war analysis by the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey calculated that the Mark 24 program cost $50 million to develop and produce, approximately $800 million in today's dollars. Those 340 torpedoes sank submarines worth an estimated $300 million in construction costs alone, killed 4,500 trained submariners Germany could not replace, and protected thousands of merchant ships carrying the fuel, ammunition, and supplies that made D-Day and the liberation of Europe possible. The weapon that wasn't a mine, that hunted submarines like a bloodhound tracking scent, that turned the ocean from sanctuary to killing field, that weapon changed naval warfare permanently. U-boats would never again dominate the seas the way they had in 1942. The age of the submarine as an unstoppable commerce raider died in the spring of 1943, killed by a device that listened in the darkness and followed the sound home. Technology matters in war, but adaptation matters more. The Germans built excellent submarines, pressure, hulls that could dive deeper, torpedoes that ran faster, propulsion systems that gave them speed and range no Allied submarine could match. They dominated the Atlantic for 3 years through superior engineering and tactical brilliance. Then the Allies changed the rules. Not with bigger depth charges, or more escort ships, or longer-range patrol aircraft, though all those helped, but with a fundamental reimagining of what an anti-submarine weapon could do. Instead of throwing explosives blindly into the ocean and hoping physics would align in their favor, they built a weapon that could think. Or at least, a weapon that could listen and chase and adapt to evasion. A weapon that turned the submarine's own propellers into a homing beacon, broadcasting its location to the mechanical predator following it through the depths. The Mark 24 acoustic homing torpedo didn't win the Battle of the Atlantic alone, but it broke the back of the Wolfpack, shattered the morale of U-boat crews, and proved that intelligence and innovation could overcome raw industrial power. May 4th, 1943. U-531 sinking in the North Atlantic, torn open by a weapon its commander never saw coming. One attack, one kill. One ghost mine that hunted instead of waiting. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't the one you can see approaching. It's the one that hears you trying to escape and follows you into the darkness. If you found this story as fascinating as I did researching it, I'd appreciate if you'd like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are dozens more untold stories from World War II that deserve to be remembered. Stories of technological breakthroughs, tactical innovations, and the people who changed the course of history. And I'll be bringing you a new one every week. What should I cover next? The night witches of the Soviet Air Force? The radar operators who won the Battle of Britain? Let me know in the comments below.